Good morning, everybody. As you can tell from my setup here, I'm doing something a little different from normal. I've presented videos from my couch before when it's been for like a special game or something like that, but this time I'm doing something very different. I'm playing an Armored Core game for the first time. Specifically, I am playing Armored Core Last Raven. I don't know much about the series, but I do know that it's considered one of the best ones, and I know that the story of the game takes place within 24 hours. So I'm giving myself 24 hours to play the game. It is 10:52 a.m. on Friday, which means I have until 10:52 a.m. on Saturday to play as much of the game as possible. And to keep me honest, there is a Tony camera that's going to be running the entire time that's going to be playing in the bottom corner of this video. Now, one quick caveat, I don't expect to finish everything in the game in 24 hours. And I'm not going to write my script within that 24-hour window either. I don't think that would be fair to you guys. That wouldn't result in that great of a video. But I will be playing the game, getting my footage, and taking notes along the way. The only thing I have done is boot up my perfectly legitimate copy of the game just to make sure that it works. Okay, 24 hours to play Armored Core Last Raven. Let's go. Not to start this thing off with a cliche, but even from that intro, I knew I was in for an action-packed experience. I was always aware of the Armored Core franchise, but like many, it's Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon that made me finally sit down and play one for myself. There's really no shame in being late to the party. I did the same thing when I started Destiny. And just like with that video, it's important for me to say that I am certainly no expert on Armored Core. This video isn't a guide, nor is it a deep dive into the lore or politics of the series. I just want to show you what it's like to experience Armored Core for the first time. Luckily, Last Raven does a great job of bringing newbies like me up to speed. It is the 11th game in the franchise after all. Here's the short version of the setup. It's a post-apocalyptic world where machines are tearing the planet apart. Three key corporations, Mirage, Crest, and Kisaragi, have merged to form the Alliance, one giant company to rule the world. Some might find security in that, but not everyone wants to see a corporatocracy. Enter Vertex, a rebel group that wants to bring the Alliance down, freeing the world of its corporate control. The war between these two groups is the central conflict of Last Raven, and things are coming to a head. As the game begins, Vertex declares that it will be making its final attack in 24 hours. That's where you come in. You are a Raven, aka a pilot of one of these mechs, known as an Armored Core, or AC for short. And for the next 24 hours, you're free to choose a side.
This facility was once under our control, but is now occupied by Vertex. We have every intention of recapturing it, but not without first having a look around.
I decided to be a corporate shill and fight for the Alliance my first time through. Maybe I should have listened to my gut and gone with the rebels instead, because even though I did okay in the beginning of my recon mission, I promptly got my butt kicked in an early boss fight against Bolt and his AC, Thunderstrike.
He's attacking. No, this can't be.
This taught me two lessons. One, I had a lot of room for improvement, and two, there were paths that were probably best kept for an imported save or New Game Plus. With that in mind, I decided to pivot and take on the first Vertex mission instead. Honestly, there were a lot of moments like this, where I just went with the mission I could actually handle. This one had me take out some Alliance intruders, which officially put me on the radar of Jacko, the leader of Vertex. It also caught the attention of Zeneda, another Vertex member and a key player in the overall story. Turns out, Jacko is looking for something called a Dominant. Not to be confused with the Final Fantasy XVI Dominants, who can summon the mighty icons. No, in this case, Jacko believes there's a special Raven capable of turning the tide of the war, leading to a complete victory for either the Alliance or Vertex. Narratively speaking, that chosen Raven is of course you, the player, though I am definitely not the best example of that.
Raven, come in.
After failing miserably at the second Vertex mission against an AC named Sundial, I went back to being a company man and fought for the Alliance once again. My second mission wasn't strictly for the Alliance though. It was requested by an individual named Evangel. He's the commander of the Alliance forces, but he's also a separate entity, for reasons we'll get into later. The key takeaway for me at this point was just how many players there were in this conflict. There's Alliance versus Vertex, but there are also independent warlords and fellow Ravens like Zenata and Evangel who have their own agendas.
Okay, it's time for a grocery store / lunch break. I will be back to the Armored Core very soon.
After fueling up, I got back to my bootlicking corporate playthrough. For the rest of the campaign, I did Alliance missions whenever possible, sometimes helping out independent warlords if my only other option was Vertex. With each successful run, the clock ticked closer and closer to that final attack from the bad guys. Well, bad guys in quotes. Again, more on that in a bit. I also began to understand Last Raven's level design a bit better. By my count, there are about half a dozen different types of missions you can take on. Escort, elimination, exploration, score attack, boss fights, and some that even felt like corridor shooters. It was around this time that I also started paying closer attention to my AC itself. There's a reason this game puts the garage menu option above the missions themselves. Buying parts, customizing your mech, really making it your own, that's a huge part of what makes these games special.
Thanks for your help, Raven.
By this point, I already felt so accomplished. I had gone on the offensive and the defensive, fought across factories, sewers, and dams, and even taken down a rival AC. I was on a roll.
Okay, so that's it for break number 2. I went to the gym, took a shower, changed clothes obviously, and had dinner. Let's see some credits. Let's finish this first campaign now.
And see the credits I did. As the final hours counted down, I found myself in an intense battle, dodging a dangerous railgun as I made my way toward the final encounter. Predictably, this was against Jacko, who actually fights at a disadvantage. Why would he take me on with a missing arm? Clearly there was something else going on there. Even the final lines from my handler Sheila questioned if this was the right path to take.
Did it really have to come down to this? Let's head back.
So that was pretty unsatisfying, which meant it was definitely time to try the Vertex path. This is where my heart really was anyway. Sticking it to the man always feels good. And honestly, it seemed like the game was encouraging me to take the Vertex route anyway. At the very least, multiple playthroughs were a must.
So I saw credits, but I know the game has like 6 endings or something like that, so I beat it, but I'm definitely not finished with it. About 10 hours into this little challenge now, so I think I have time to do another campaign run. So one more break, and then we'll jump in with the Vertex. Let's do this.
This time, I kicked things off by raiding an Alliance base and just going to town, destroying all the supplies there. It was a blast, literally and figuratively, and it served as a great introduction, or rather, reintroduction, to Evangel. The Alliance commander and his goons rolled up as I left the fort, but they didn't try to gun me down immediately. Even from the opposing side, Evangel showed respect for me.
Patience. It's too soon to consider them our enemy.
During the previous campaign, Evangel had actually switched sides, turning tail to fight for Vertex. By the end, it was revealed he was a double agent working for the Alliance all along. So, knowing that, then seeing the way he reacted to me in this second campaign really helped paint him as a more complex character. In fact, complexity is the key word for a lot of my revelations in the Vertex campaign. Seeing the other side of the conflict opened my eyes to a lot of what was really going on. For one, I realized just how expendable soldiers were in the eyes of the Alliance. Back then, in my first encounter with Jacko, I was essentially being used as bait. The mission briefing acknowledged that it seemed like a trap, but they still sent me in. Later on, I was used as a diversion. If the enemy caught me, so be it. My objective wasn't the main objective anyway.
You're free to leave the area once the enemy's attention is sufficiently focused on your AC. Good luck, Raven.
The Vertex missions, by contrast, never made me feel this way. Jacko knew that enemy ACs had to be eliminated along the path to victory, but he also viewed his Ravens as people, not cannon fodder. Again, there's a complexity there. I also appreciated the new perspectives on individual missions. Last Raven repeats the same maps across its campaigns, and that makes sense. These are the locations over which the Alliance and Vertex are vying for control. They're an opportunity to see both sides of a battle. My first time through, I helped escort a warlord's helicopter force through a contested dam. The second time, I was the one shooting them down. As I gained this new perspective, I also ended up with more questions. I expected to face Evangel at the end of this second campaign, but instead I ran up against a different AC named Jouster, as well as a massive machine called the Leviathan. There was also talk of something called the Pulverizer, a super weapon that neither faction seemed to have laid claim to. Who was Rimfire, and why did they hate me so much? Also, the bugs. Why did I fight so many bugs? And why did the Kisaragi Corporation come to me, completely separate from the Alliance, to ask me to retrieve some old research data? I was firmly established with Vertex by that point. Maybe these answers are obvious to people who played previous Armored Core titles. Maybe they awaited me in one of the game's other paths. Maybe Zenaida had them, I don't know. I hadn't seen her since the beginning of the first campaign. All I knew then was that the world of Last Raven was even larger than I anticipated. 2 playthroughs weren't going to be enough, but that's exactly why I gave myself the 24-hour restriction. That and, it's the whole thing with the game.
Okay, so it's 1 a.m. and I'm exhausted, but I feel accomplished because I did see credits once today. So I finished one whole campaign. I'm almost finished a second one. And I think when I wake up in the morning, I'm actually going to roll it back and see what one of the other possible paths holds, just for more variety. But wow, there's a lot to this game.
As my window closed, I rolled things back to the beginning to try a new path. After quickly redoing some missions I knew I could handle, oh hey Zenaida, where have you been? I took a new warlord offer that brought me face to face with an AC that I hadn't even heard of before. It was called South Nail, and it was piloted by someone named Zubin El Ganubi.
You will pay for your mistake.
If the last few points I made weren't clear enough, then I hope throwing in a whole new character as I wrap things up does the trick. There are so many threads to follow in Armored Core Last Raven. There's a reason the game has 6, technically 7 whole endings. Seeing the flowchart of possible missions blew my mind. Even after all that, I'd only earned about 30% overall game completion.
Time is up. It is 10:53 a.m. again, and my 24 hours with Armored Core Last Raven are done. I did a little bit more this morning just to try a third path just to see what would happen. I encountered a character I never even heard of on the other path, so man, even with finishing one whole campaign, almost finishing a second, there is just so much more to this game, and honestly, that's really impressive.
Thanks, me from the past. Impressive is certainly one way to put it. Putting myself in the Raven's shoes, a better word might be awe-inspiring. Last Raven presents you with what seems like a simple conflict, corporation versus rebels, but the world hosting that conflict holds so much more. It gives you true independence to choose sides, with diverging paths that rarely lock you into fighting for one side or the other until the late game. It's an opportunity to take part in a narrative that moves on with or without you. You can try to battle AC Vigilance, for example, but someone else will destroy that mech if you decide to take on a different mission. Evangel will do his double agent thing no matter which side you're on, which means you might not experience the same brand of betrayal. By taking part in the war, you have an influence on these things. You are not always the central hero, but you are an important member of the team, whichever team it may be at the time. It's possible to become the titular Last Raven, but only by doing some very specific things. And if you're like me, most of the other ACs are definitely gonna outlive you.
Raven, come in.
Speaking of death, someone is probably going to ask, so yes, I can see how Armored Core passed on some of its DNA to the Soulsborne franchise. The energy meter is akin to a stamina bar, there are multiple paths and endings, and NPCs have mysterious and often complex motivations. But let's stay focused in this last moment. My final takeaway is this. Armored Core Last Raven has a lot to say, and it gives players the freedom to respond to it how they see fit. The faction you decide to fight for, the missions you decide to accept, the mech you make for yourself, these things let every player carve their own unique path through the game. I'm glad I got to make mine, And whether you decide to go back to an old school Armored Core or try something new, I hope you find your path too.
Thank you, Raven.
Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what Framework is doing, definitely hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to check out what we've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.